Here's your news for March 28, 2020. We're starting off with the news from WrestleMania 36, as yesterday it was confirmed that Roman Reigns won't be part of the show. The big dog opted not to compete at the show, as he is rightly concerned about traveling with his compromised immune system due to the 2 battles with leukemia he's had. On Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer spoke about the situation, saying that it wasn't until Reigns discovered that The Miz was sick that he opted not to wrestle. He said, "It was very interesting because he was there, and he made the call, and it had to do in some form with The Miz being sick and the Usos not being happy about it. I don't know much else, but that's all I was told. You know, it's a weird story because if you followed it, because basic logic was that he should have stayed home. Everyone's got a risk, but his risk was high. His reward was high too, but his risk was really high too. For a guy who has kids, it was his decision, but that decision shouldn't have been put on him." Now, WrestleMania will go ahead without the big dog, and while Roman was very likely going to win the Universal title at the show, nobody can blame him for putting his health first. Roman's absence from WrestleMania now means that Universal Champion Goldberg is without an opponent, though that may not be the case for long. Ever since he's joined the WWE, Matt Riddle has made his feelings about the Hall of Famer clear, as he's constantly mocked Goldberg, calling him dangerous, and has once again challenged him for a match. On Twitter, the King of Bros called Goldberg Willie G and said that he's ready if the Universal Champion needs a new opponent. The WWE has no shortage of possible opponents when it comes to Goldberg, though it's been rumored that Braun Strowman will be taking the big dog's spot. And with WrestleMania just over a week away, the company will have to think of something fast for our Universal Champion. Now, we mentioned earlier that The Miz was recently ill, and that helped Roman Reigns make his decision not to work WrestleMania, but the A-lister isn't the only one who's feeling under the weather. While The Miz was supposed to defend his SmackDown tag team titles with John Morrison at WrestleMania, that match is up in the air, and someone else who may not make it to the showcase of the Immortals is Bobby Lashley. After a promotional trip earlier this month to South Africa, Lashley has been quarantined, which is now standard practice for anyone returning from overseas. It's not clear whether his WrestleMania match against Aleister Black was filmed this week due to the quarantine, but if the match doesn't happen, this would explain the lack of build on Monday Night Raw. Needless to say, this is a very worrying time for everyone, as Miz and Lashley join Reigns, as well as Rey Mysterio and Dana Brooke, who are both quarantined, and we can only send out best wishes to everyone who may have been affected. We've got even more news of superstars missing shows now, as according to the PW Insider, one name fans shouldn't expect to see is Buddy Murphy. Their report indicates that the former Cruiserweight and Raw Tag Team Champion was supposed to appear but has been pulled, saying, "Buddy Murphy was originally slated to appear on this Monday's Raw broadcast, but we're told he was not cleared to appear, and will also not be appearing on WrestleMania 36's broadcast." WWE sources have also confirmed that both Asuka and Cesaro did work the WrestleMania tapings, despite other reports saying they are off sick, so if they are off the road, then it would be for the next TV tapings. With so many people being taken off the WrestleMania card, it's important that everyone gets their facts right, which is why we want to make clear that reports of Edge being pulled are completely false. Though some sites and social media have stated that the Rated R superstar was pulled from the show, Dave Meltzer on the Wrestling Observer Forum confirmed that the last man standing match against Randy Orton did take place at the tapings, meaning fans can hopefully see the Ultimate Opportunist take his revenge on the Viper next week at WrestleMania 36. With so many changes happening to WrestleMania, it's hard to keep track of what's going on, so we've got a handy list of the confirmed matches for the show. WWE Champion Brock Lesnar vs. Drew McIntyre will still take place, as will Raw Women's Champion Becky Lynch vs. Shayna Baszler. Rhea Ripley will defend the NXT Women's title match against Charlotte Flair, while John Cena will face The Fiend in a Firefly Funhouse match. Speaking of stipulations, AJ Styles hopes to give The Undertaker his 3rd WrestleMania loss in the first ever Boneyard match, while a triple threat tag team ladder match between The Miz and Morrison, The New Day, and The Usos is slated for the show, although The Miz's condition could be a factor in whether this match airs. Raw's tag team titles will also be defended as the Street Profits face Angel Garza and Austin Theory, who is replacing Andrade after the United States champion suffered a rib injury during this week's match on Raw, where the duo faced Cedric Alexander and Ricochet. In singles action, Kevin Owens will face Seth Rollins, and Elias will take on King Corbin, and a match between Aleister Black and Lashley is scheduled, though we don't know if it's been filmed. What we do know is that Edge vs. Randy Orton has been filmed, and fans can also see Bayley take on 4 other competitors with her SmackDown Women's title on the line. On this week's edition of SmackDown, Drew Gulak earned his friend Daniel Bryan an Intercontinental title match against Sami Zayn, as it's clear WrestleMania will be stacked despite everything that's been going on. With such a huge night, it's hardly surprising that WWE decided to split WrestleMania into 2 nights, as for years, fans have complained about the length of the show. Including last year's kickoff event, WrestleMania 35 lasted over 7 hours, and it looks like this year's event will be much easier to digest. Dave Meltzer has said that each night of WrestleMania is expected to be treated as a full pay-per-view, meaning each night will be in excess of 3 hours long. Unfortunately for pay-per-view providers, the fact that WrestleMania will now be over 2 nights has caused a lot of confusion, according to Meltzer. He said, "One cable company is charging $59.99 a night for both nights, which is ridiculous. Another one is charging $9.99 for one night and $59.99 for the other night, which makes no sense either. It's because it's being thrown in and the company's making these decisions, not WWE. They don't know what to make of it. We certainly wouldn't want to pay a total of $120 for a WrestleMania without a live crowd, so hopefully those people with access to the network will shill out the $9.99 required to watch both nights, as well as all of WWE's other content." We are taking a break from WWE now to look at All Elite Wrestling, as Brody Lee has certainly made a big impression in his short time with the company. After debuting on last week's show, the former Luke Harper won his debut match and also sat down with Chris Jericho for the Talk is Jericho podcast. Speaking about his WWE tenure, Lee revealed that he pitched various ideas to Vince McMahon, but the boss wouldn't bite. He said, "I'm very much into serial killers, so I wanted to collect something from each person I would beat. The problem became I wasn't beating anybody. I also wanted to be a smart monster, an intelligent monster, where I could speak like I do in an intelligent way and break my opponents down in a way that I wasn't doing in the Wyatt family. Having the same matches I was having and look the same, but also intelligent, almost like Bruiser Brody." Though the idea of an intelligent Harper could have been interesting, it never happened, as the former Intercontinental Champion spent his WWE tenure as the strong silent type, almost always as part of a team or a group. Now with his own flock in AEW, it'll be interesting to see what the future holds for Lee, as he's finally able to share his creative side with the fans. Back to WWE now, and while WrestleMania is supposed to be the biggest show of the year, and therefore the biggest payday for the superstars, that may not be the case this year. Speaking on Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer said that while the part-timers have the Saudi Arabia shows as their biggest payday, WrestleMania remains the top show for mid-card and lower talent, but added, "I think the top guys will probably get main event WrestleMania payoffs because he always takes care of the top guys. That's been the MO. As far as the other guys, who knows?" This is just the latest talk about money, as Braun Strowman recently claimed that he wasn't being paid by WWE during this worrying time, but his comments have been disputed in the days since. It's clear that this year's show was nothing like what WWE had planned just a few months ago, and hopefully it won't be long until things go back to normal. With everything that's been going on in the world, it's always good to see superstars trying to make things better for the fans, and one person who at least attempted to do that this week was Scott Dawson. Recently, the former tag team champion posted a rare match of his from his NXT days, which saw him and Dash Wilder take on the Undisputed Era from a live event in San Antonio, Texas. Though Dawson had the best of intentions when uploading the footage, the WWE weren't too pleased, as they filed a takedown notice on Dawson's video for using footage from a WWE event, despite the rules about no videotaping the shows. This certainly seems like a petty move by WWE, as the top guy was just trying to give out a good match during this worrying time. With reports of both Dash and Dawson not being paid for weeks, And supposedly aiming to leave WWE later this year, it's not surprising that WWE have taken this course of action. And this certainly won't help their chances of getting the Revival to stay when their contracts expire later this year. We've got news from the Benoit family now, as though Chris Benoit's final actions will forever taint his legacy. That hasn't stopped his remaining son David from aspiring to be a professional wrestler. One person who worked closely with David's father in both WWE and WCW was Eric Bischoff, who spoke about the possibility of David joining either WWE or AEW on his 83 Weeks podcast. He said, "I think first of all, I think he'd be far better served to go to AEW than WWE. But in either case, if either of those opportunities became available, if I were managing David, I would really think hard about getting into the ring and making that choice." Bischoff went on to discuss that while second-generation stars usually have it rough as they're compared to their parents, this would be especially difficult for David given both the talent of his father and Chris's horrific final acts. Ultimately, time will tell whether David makes it in wrestling, and we can only hope for the best for his possible career. We are looking at CM Punk news now, as recently the relationship between him and WWE has been frosty, especially after Punk claimed the company was begging for him to compete at WrestleMania. Now it seems the best in the world has fallen out of favor with his former manager Paul Heyman, as according to reports, even the Raw executive director isn't pushing too hard for Punk to be used. For now, Punk seems more than happy not wrestling, as he's making plenty of money with WWE backstage on FS1 without taking a bump. And finally, today we're ending with a recap of SmackDown, as this week's show could lead to a lot of changes at WrestleMania. Despite all other media outlets reporting that Reigns won't be competing at WrestleMania, the company aired the Big Dog's WrestleMania 32 match against Triple H before the Game appeared on the broadcast to give his prediction about the Reigns-Goldberg match. It's certainly an interesting strategy by WWE, as they're trying to say that the match will still be happening despite what a majority of the fans already know. The show also saw a segment where King Corbin pushed Elias off a high structure, which could lead to a kayfabe injury, and their match being pulled from WrestleMania if necessary. A tag team #1 contenders match between The New Day and the Usos saw The Miz and Morrison interfere, leading to the triple threat ladder match being announced, though, as we previously stated, Miz's condition will be a factor on whether this match is aired. The Intercontinental title match between Sami Zayn and Daniel Bryan was made official, as was a match between Otis and Dolph Ziggler that will take place at WrestleMania. WWE didn't give the explanation as to why Dana Brooke was pulled from the SmackDown Women's title match, and with the company announcing the Firefly Funhouse stipulation for Wyatt vs. Cena, WrestleMania is definitely going to be a show unlike any other.